Our next presenter will be Péter Szalay. He's a PhD and is an architectural historian from the Slovak Academy of Sciences. He works at the Department of Architecture of the Institute of History of Slovak Academy of Sciences and at the Department of Art History of Faculty of Arts of Comenius University in Bratislava. His research focuses on architecture of the 20th and 21st centuries from the art historical heritage as well as broader social and environmental point of view. Péter Szalay is an executive editor of the scientific journal Architecture and Urbanismus and a member of the Docomomo International. He will introduce us a Slovak case study. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I will start fast. I will try to be fast. So I will focus my presentation on the case study of Petržalka in Bratislava, Slovakia, the largest post-war housing estate in Central Europe. Petržalka and its unbuilt linear center, called the Central Axis, served me as a case study for discovering modernist planning of housing and transport infrastructure, its ruptures and continuities during the socialist and post-socialist decades. And finally, I will present a specific case that I think is an inspiring example of adaptation in the context of ongoing climate change and the housing crisis. The concept of temporality was a fundamental aspect of the modernist discourse that shaped the design of housing estates. In doing so, it was closely linked in socialism to the future orientation of the transition to the higher level of society, from socialism to communism. Architects as planners anticipated that residential architecture would be transformed in the relatively near future according to the new economic and social conditions. Please, next slide. The planning of the new district of Bratislava, Petržalka, emerged from the context of the late 1960s, a period characterized by a prevailing techno-optimism. The international competition, which was co-organized by UAI, served as a showcase of the various late modernist town planning conception, as you can see on the slide. The pre-arrangement pre-international cooperation in the planning and construction of the Petržalka was thwarted by the invasion of Warsaw troops into Czechoslovakia in 1968. After the event, during the so-called normalization, the new isolationism of Czechoslovakia from Western cooperation began. However, some of the ideas were incorporated into the final design, which was created by the local architects Stanislav Talaš and Josef Chovanec, as you can see on the slide. One of these was the linear center of the housing estate. In normalization era in Czechoslovakia, the modernist, futurist, and technocratic approach to planning remained unchanged by the postmodern critic which start in Western Europe. This is exemplified by the plan for the linear center of Petržalka, which should be developed in stages following the technological progress. In addition to the planned technical upgrading of the transportation system, as you can see in the center, the housing blocks are also be upgraded. The standard of the flats should be upgraded by rebuilding the planned flexible prefabricated construction system called Univex. However, the new construction system invented specially for Petržalka has not been adapted by the construction company. As a result, the entire Petržalka housing stock for 130,000 inhabitants was realized from 3 inflexible older construction systems. These high-rise housing blocks, next figure. last one back. Thank you. Comprise smaller flats dedicated for young inhabitants situated on terraces or plateaus, central public spaces elevated upon the automobile and public transportation corridor. Similarly, it may serve the function of envelope construction, which is designed to safeguard a quiet residential zone from the rush of the linear city center. This concept is deeply embedded in the Smithsonian ideas of streets in the sky. Next figure. In the 1980s, this futuristic plan underwent a transformation. It is represented by the change in the plan of the transport backbone of the housing estate, the metro line. The figure on the bottom. Back, please. The Bratislava Stavo project team changed the general approach, which automotive road and public buildings on the same level on the ground, designed in a more traditional way as a compact structure. However, the construction of the metro line only started in 1988 and was stopped immediately after the fall of the communism. The debate over the future of the modernist housing estates constitute a pivotal topic of discussion within the architectural and urban planning community, both prior to the collapse of the socialism and in the early post-socialist period. The debate was framed by the concept of humanization of housing estate. However, following the event of 1989, it assumed a more radical character. The modernist project of housing estate was generally rejected on the ground of its inhuman nature. The rejection was not only from the perspective of architects and urban planners who were critical of the loose urban structure and the monotony of mass-produced prefabricated architecture, but also from a social point of view, where the transformation of housing estate into ghettos was perceived as a potential consequences. This by forcing by a number of esteemed experts, including urban sociologist Josef Pasiak from Slovak Academy of Sciences, who've posited that the residential community cannot emerge on housing estates. Next. By the end of 1990, the subject of housing estates had become a less prominent topic of discussion. The relatively successful privatization of the housing stock of housing estate that took place in Slovakia, particularly in the second half of the 1990s, served to stabilize the debate. The weakening of the interest to the housing estate occurred without the implementation of any significant humanization projects such as those advocated by the architects and sociologists in turn of the 1980s and 1990s. The monotonous grey of the prefabs was replaced by the colorful monotony of the insulated facades, and the inhospitable space between the prefabs grew up naturally into informal parks. A number of studies conducted in the new millennium indicated a shift in attitude toward the housing estate. With the growing acceptance of the structures, notably in the field of the architectural history, but also among the inhabitants, the social sciences have identified the process of habituation to housing estate as articulated by Ferencúrová and Jane in the study Getting Used to Petržalka. Ferencúrová and Jane, researchers into the everyday consumption of Petržalka's residents, showed that the habituation in Petržalka does not function as a deliberate creation of tactics, and certainly not as a conscious resistance. On the contrary, in the described habituation to the estate, they even saw resignation and submission of the inhabitants. But over the past decade, public space and its associated infrastructure have emerged. Next. as a key site for the emergence of deeper social transformation in the context of housing estates. It has generated a conscious resistance and showed that it's possible form a residential community even in the housing estate. This shows the example of the successful struggle of Petržalka inhabitants against the plan of the construction of the 4-lane road in the former corridor of modernist linear center. The new project treated the area of the central axis primarily as a transport corridor where the electrified track was sided with the 4-lane access road, fully in line with the technocratic plans of 20th century transport engineering, following rapid automotive mobility to urban setting. The public only learned of the plans for construction of the transport corridor almost by accident when Metro I submitted a request for the start of the 2013 to cut down the trees growing in the area of the Planet Rail. The massive scale of clearance up to 2,000 trees and the eventual creation of heavily used roadway on the site led to extremely strong opposition from the residents. Within a short time, a citizen movement sprang to mobilize the public and circulate a petition that finally brought the projects. I will conclude. That promised directly its condition to create only a tram line and reserve the major remittent of the land as a park. And the next case study, which were dedicated to the terraces, I will show next figure. Was designed for reuse these spaces, which were not so popular as this widely growing park. In fact, the architects who made a project about the terraces trying to find a solution to reconstruct these places, and they found it together with the inhabitants of this block of flats to reconstruct the spaces or to make kind of a mobile architecture which will reuse anew the spaces, and this kind of solution showed not just the way how we can reuse and reconstruct this architecture, but how this effort could make a new community feeling of the inhabitants of the space. Thank you, and sorry for.